Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into something pretty interesting. We're talking about Teslas, but not the cars, their culture. We got our hands on their employee handbook, and, well, let's just say it's definitely not what you'd expect.
Yeah, not your typical HR manual, that's for sure. It's more like a statement, like this is how we do things here. This is who we are.
Yeah, right off the bat, they call it the Anti-Handbook handbook.
So that kind of sets the tone, right?
Definitely. It's like they're rejecting all those traditional corporate norms, all those, rules and regulations. They're basically saying, we trust you to be awesome.
That trust thing is a big deal at Tesla. They have this, I don't even know what to call it.
Radical.
Yeah, radical approach to trust. It's almost like they flip the whole employer-employee dynamic on its head.
It's like, we're betting on you being awesome, and we're only going to step in if you prove us wrong. High bar, but it shows a lot of faith in their employees. A lot of faith, yeah. They actually call it guilty until proven innocent, but flipped. It's mind-blowing. Like, imagine going to work every day, knowing your company has that level of confidence in you. How motivating would that be?
It's certainly a unique approach. I think it speaks to their desire to attract a specific type of person. Someone who's self-driven, responsible, someone who thrives on autonomy.
Absolutely. And they're very clear about this in the handbook. They say, we give everyone who joins our team a lot of trust and responsibility. We operate with the assumption that everyone will do the right thing.
It's a bold statement for sure. Makes you wonder, how do they screen for that,
Yeah.
Their hiring process must be pretty intense.
Oh, absolutely. They're looking for the best of the best. But they also acknowledge that, hey, sometimes people mess up, right? People break that trust. And their response, we won't change our approach because of the few who have let us down. Instead, we let them go.
It's tough, but it shows how committed they are to maintaining that high-performing culture. No compromises.
No compromises, yeah. Speaking of high standards, let's talk about communication. Now, most companies have all these, rigid hierarchies, layers of bureaucracy. But Tesla, different story.
Yeah, they've got this flat organizational structure. You can imagine, like, the CEO isn't stuck at the top of this giant pyramid. It's more like a network, Anyone can connect with anyone else to solve problems. Less about hierarchy, more about getting things done.
Exactly, and that goes right into their open communication policy, which is
pretty radical. I mean, radical transparency, right? You could be a brand new hire, and you could walk up to Elon Musk and pitch an idea. It wouldn't happen at most companies.
No way.
Right.
But at Tesla, they actually encourage it. The handbook says, you should consider yourself obligated to communicate until the right thing happens.
Wow.
Need to chat with a VP in another department, go for it.
That's amazing.
And that open communication, it goes hand in hand with their approach to problem solving.
You're saying they don't just want you to communicate, they want you to be proactive.
Right. They expect you to be a proactive problem solver. You don't just sit around waiting for instructions. You take ownership, find solutions.
It's all about empowering people to identify issues, take initiative, regardless of, their position or area of expertise.
And no one told me is not an excuse at Tesla. They expect you to figure things out, ask questions, be resourceful.
It's like fostering that sense of ownership, right? Accountability at every level.
Exactly. And it all ties back to their idea that the company's success is everyone's #1 job. Like, we're all in this together.
Yeah, it's about breaking down those silos, encouraging everyone to contribute to the big picture.
They want people who are passionate, people who are always thinking about how to improve things.
Even if it's outside their specific job description.
Now, it might sound kind of intense so far, but they also recognize the importance of feedback and growth. They don't just throw you in the deep end and say, sink or swim.
No, they want you to learn, develop, reach your full potential.
Right. But their approach to feedback is pretty different. It's not your typical annual performance review.
It's more about continuous feedback, encouraging people to take initiative, ask for feedback, rather than waiting for those formal evaluations.
Exactly. It's all about constant learning, improvement, and goes back to that emphasis on self-driven individuals.
They're saying, we're here to support you, but ultimately, your growth is in your hands.
It's a high trust, high accountability approach. And speaking of trust, let's talk about safety. You'd think a company building, high-performance electric vehicles, pushing the boundaries of technology, they'd have a ton of strict rules.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But Tesla takes a different approach.
It's more about creating a culture of safety consciousness, proactive communication.
They actually say, Trust us, if we've created a policy or rule, it's only because it was absolutely needed. We don't have arbitrary rules.
Wow, it's a pretty strong statement.
It is. It really reflects their core principle of trusting their employees. It's not about blindly following rules. It's about being aware, using common sense, and speaking up if you see anything that could compromise safety.
Yeah, I like that.
And that leads us right into their attendance policy, or I should say, their be reliable philosophy.
Okay, tell me more.
They're pretty straightforward about it.
So what do they say?
They literally say, be the kind of person your team can rely on. It's all about being present, accountable, contributing to the team's success.
And if something comes up, life happens.
Oh, absolutely. They expect you to let your supervisor know ASA.
Makes sense.
And they emphasize that supervisors will be reasonable and respectful if you are.
It's that two-way street, trust and communication.
Exactly.
It reinforces that high trust environment, but also that expectation of mutual accountability.
It's a partnership, not a dictatorship.
I like that.
Now, when it comes to tardiness, they keep it lighthearted, but firm.
Okay, how do they put it?
They literally say, this isn't school.
I like that.
It's a gentle reminder that, you're in a professional environment. Punctuality matters.
It's a good balance, setting clear expectations,
Yeah.
but keeping it informal and approachable.
And their approach to sick leave and vacations, equally straightforward. They want you to stay home when you're sick. Use your PTO.
No guilt trips.
No guilt trips. And for vacations, it's all about planning in advance, getting your supervisor's approval, then enjoying your time off.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
I like it.
But let's be clear. There are consequences for not showing up without notice.
Oh.
They have a pretty blunt way of putting it.
I'm intrigued. What do they say?
They say, our assumption will be that if you don't call and don't show up for work, you're a jerk.
Okay, a little harsh, but
Yeah.
definitely memorable.
It gets the point across.
Yeah.
They also have a clear stance on outside employment. You're not going to get grilled about your side hustle or anything, but they do expect you to prioritize your work at Tesla.
So another job's fine, as long as it doesn't interfere with your performance at Tesla.
Exactly. Now, you ready for this? They have a section in the handbook called stupid stuff.
Okay, that's interesting. What kind of stuff are we talking about here?
It's their way of saying, don't be a jerk. Use common sense, and we'll all get along fine.
Common sense stuff.
Right. They list things like, stealing, damaging company property, disclosing confidential information, things that should be obvious, but apparently need to be spelled out.
Makes sense.
And they end this section with this. If you think you're the kind of person who might do something that could be on a list of stupid stuff, do us all a favor and leave now.
I appreciate the directness.
Right.
So with all this talk about high standards, expectations, you might think it's all work and no play at Tesla.
You might think that.
But they actually emphasize having fun.
They do. They get that happy employees are productive employees.
That's smart.
They even say, if you aren't having fun at some level, you'll be unhappy. We don't want that. We want you to work hard, love what you do, and have fun.
I mean, that makes sense, right?
It makes total sense.
Yep. Happy employees are more engaged employees.
Exactly. Of course, even in best workplaces, issues come up. So how does Tesla handle that?
Yeah, how do they deal with those conflicts, problems?
Well, they close the handbook with a section on resolving concerns.
Okay, what's their approach?
And, you guessed it, open communication.
No surprises there.
If you have a concern, talk to someone. They encourage you to speak freely and openly with anyone you think can help resolve the issue.
It's refreshing to see a company that really values that transparency, employee feedback, even when it comes to, sensitive issues.
So there you have it, part one of our deep dive into Tesla's unique culture. High standards, open communication, a whole lot of trust.
It's a bold experiment for sure, a radical departure from, traditional corporate culture.
It really makes you think about the future of work.
It does.
And we're just getting started. In part two, we'll be diving deeper into the implications of Tesla's approach, exploring different perspectives on this fascinating work culture. Stay tuned.
Makes you think, doesn't it? This whole ownership mentality thing at Tesla, it's like they're blurring the lines between employee and entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's like everyone's expected to be a mini Elon, always innovating, pushing the limits. They actually say in the handbook, if you see opportunities to improve the way we do things, speak up. Even if these are outside your area of responsibility.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, but it's also a lot of potential freedom.
Right, that's the interesting part, this kind of autonomy. It can be really empowering for some people.
Absolutely. The people who thrive on challenges, the ones who want to make a real impact.
But it could also be overwhelming, right?
Totally. I mean, not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, some people just want a job, a paycheck, go home at the end of the day.
Exactly. And that's where the potential for burnout comes in. I mean, if you're constantly expected to be on, to be innovating, pushing the limits.
Especially at a company like Tesla, known for its demanding environment.
Yeah, you hear the stories. Long hours, intense pressure, constant push to innovate.
Sounds exhilarating, but also exhausting.
It makes you wonder about work-life balance. Is it even possible at a place like Tesla?
It's a valid question. Something potential employees should definitely consider.
You know, we've talked about the downsides of all this individual initiative, but what about the other side of that coin? What about the potential downsides of too much freedom?
Interesting point. What happens when there's not enough direction, structure?
Right, like everyone's a captain, but no one's steering the ship.
You need some coordination, right, to achieve those common goals.
Exactly. So it's not just about giving people freedom, it's about giving them the right kind of freedom.
The kind that's aligned with the company's goals.
And allows them to contribute in a meaningful way.
And that brings us back to Tesla's leadership, specifically Elon Musk. Visionary leader, no doubt, but also demanding.
We've all heard the stories, right?
Long hours, demanding deadlines, that pressure to deliver.
Which can be motivating for some, but it can also lead to burnout, stress.
It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, his leadership has been crucial to Tesla's success. He's pushed the boundaries of what's possible.
But there's also a potential downside to that relentless drive.
It raises questions about sustainability.
Right. Can you constantly push people to their limits without breaking them?
And what happens when Musk is no longer at the helm? Can Tesla's culture survive without him?
That's a question a lot of people are asking.
It might come down to their ability to evolve beyond the cult of personality.
To create a system, a culture that can thrive even without him.
It's about finding that balance between inspiration and sustainability.
Pushing people to achieve great things, but also ensuring their well-being.
It's a challenge for any company, not just Tesla.
So after all this discussion, after dissecting this handbook, we're left with the question, is Tesla's approach good or bad?
It's not that simple. It's a fascinating experiment. And like any experiment, there are pros and cons.
Risks and rewards.
Exactly.
It's a high-stakes game.
And only time will tell if they'll be successful.
One thing's for sure, though.
They've sparked a conversation about the future of work.
Challenging assumptions.
About how companies should be run.
How employees should be treated.
It's a conversation we all need to be having.
As we navigate this ever-changing world of work.
Tesla's model might not be for everyone,
but it offers valuable lessons.
Insights that we can all apply.
Regardless of our industry or role. So, in part 3, let's shift gears a bit and explore what we can learn from Tesla's experiment and how we can apply those lessons to create healthier, more fulfilling, and ultimately more sustainable work cultures. All right, so we spent a lot of time with this Tesla handbook, breaking it down, looking at the different pieces. But what does it all mean for the rest of us? You know, most people listening aren't running car companies.
Yeah, it's a good question. What can we actually take away from all this? How can we apply these insights to our own work lives?
Right, because let's face it, not everyone's cut out for the Tesla way. It's a very specific kind of environment.
It is. High pressure, high reward. Not everyone thrives in that kind of setting.
I know I'd probably be thinking, no thanks on those 80-hour work weeks.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I hear you.
But there are still some valuable lessons here for all of us, whether we're entrepreneurs, employees, somewhere in between.
I agree. One of the biggest takeaways for me is the power of trust and autonomy.
Yeah, they really give their employees a lot of freedom.
It's amazing how much responsibility they hand over.
And that can be incredibly motivating, right? To know that your company believes in you that much.
Absolutely. It's like they're saying, we hired you because we think you're capable. Now go out there and show us what you can do.
But it's not just about giving people freedom. It's also about setting clear expectations.
Right. You can't just throw someone in the deep end.
Yeah.
And expect them to figure everything out on their own.
Exactly. You need to provide support, guidance.
It's about finding that balance between freedom and structure.
Individual initiative and collective responsibility.
It's not easy, but when you get it right, it's magic.
Think about it. Have you ever been in a situation at work where you felt micromanaged? Like you had no room to breathe, no room to make decisions?
I have. It's the worst.
It kills creativity, motivation.
Absolutely.
But on the flip side, when you're given a challenge and the freedom to figure it out, don't you feel more invested in the outcome?
For sure. That's the power of autonomy.
Ownership, pride in your work.
But again, it requires clear communication, making sure everyone understands the goals.
And speaking of communication, that's another big lesson from Tesla. They really encourage their employees to speak up, share ideas, challenge the status quo.
Even go straight to the top if they need to.
Right, that radical transparency we talked about?
It can be so valuable, especially in a company that's constantly innovating.
But let's be real, open communication only works if people feel safe.
Exactly. You can't just tell people to speak their minds and then punish them when they do.
It needs to be a culture of respect, empathy.
Active listening.
People need to know their voices will be heard, even if they're dissenting opinions.
And that goes both ways, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Leaders need to be open to feedback, too.
Even negative feedback.
Be willing to admit when they're wrong.
Yeah.
And adjust course if necessary.
It's about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement,
where everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's this. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to culture.
What works for Tesla might not work for every company.
It's about finding what's right for your organization, your people, your goals.
And it's about being intentional, actively shaping the culture you want.
It doesn't just happen. You have to build it.
And it's an ongoing process. It requires attention, adaptation.
Asking tough questions, experimenting, being willing to learn and evolve.
So no matter what your role is, whether you're leading a team, building a company, or just trying to make a difference in your own little corner of the world, take a page from Tesla's playbook. Embrace trust, autonomy, foster open communication, create a culture where people feel valued, empowered,
inspired to do their best work.
And hey, maybe even have a little fun along the way.
That's important too.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Tesla. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing boundaries.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.